Emily Harper stood at the edge of the dense Ashwood forest, the towering trees casting long shadows in the late afternoon sun. She had returned to her hometown to settle her late mother's affairs, but the mysteries surrounding her mother's death drew her deeper into the woods each day. Today was no different. Emily's fiery red hair was tied back in a ponytail, her green eyes scanning the familiar yet ominous landscape. Dressed in hiking boots, jeans, and a flannel shirt, she carried a backpack filled with her botanist tools, always eager to discover something new. However, today her goal was different. She was searching for answers. The townsfolk whispered of an old legend, one that Clara Harper had often told Emily as a child, a tale of a watcher in the woods. According to the legend, a malevolent spirit guarded the forest, protecting its secrets at all costs. Clara had always brushed it off as just a story to keep children from wandering too far, but her sudden and mysterious death had cast a sinister shadow on those old tales. As Emily ventured deeper into the forest, she felt a presence, an unsettling feeling of being watched. She paused, glancing around, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. She pressed on, determined to find the truth. Meanwhile, Sheriff Daniel O'Connor was patrolling the outskirts of the forest. Emily's return had stirred something in him, an old protective instinct. His rugged features were set in a determined expression, his dark brown hair tousled from the breeze. He knew Emily well enough to predict her actions, and he feared for her safety. The woods were no place for anyone, especially after dark. Just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Daniel spotted Emily's Jeep parked near the forest entrance. He sighed, grabbing his flashlight and heading into the trees. His military training made him cautious and methodical, moving silently through the underbrush. Emily reached a clearing she remembered from her childhood, where wildflowers once bloomed. Now, it was eerily silent. She knelt down, examining the soil, and noticed something odd: symbols etched into the ground, forming a crude circle. Her heart raced as she realized these markings were not natural. Suddenly, a rustling noise behind her made Emily jump. She spun around, flashlight in hand, to see Daniel emerging from the shadows. Relief washed over her momentarily, but it quickly faded as she saw his grave expression. "Emily, you shouldn't be here," Daniel said, his blue eyes scanning the surroundings. "I had to find out what happened to my mother," Emily replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Before Daniel could respond, an icy wind swept through the clearing, and the temperature plummeted. The shadows around them seemed to grow darker, more oppressive. The symbols on the ground began to glow faintly, casting an eerie light. Abernathy had warned Emily of this, recounting the legend in her frail, trembling voice. "The Watcher is real, child. It guards the secrets of the forest and takes anyone who dares to uncover them." The ground trembled, and from the darkness, a figure emerged, a tall, shadowy entity with glowing eyes. Emily and Daniel stood frozen, the weight of the legend crashing down on them. The Watcher in the woods was no mere story. The entity moved towards Emily, its presence suffocating. Daniel stepped in front of her, drawing his firearm, though deep down he knew it would be useless. "Stay back," Daniel shouted, but the Watcher continued its advance. Suddenly, Emily remembered something her mother had told her, a way to appease the spirit. She frantically searched her backpack and pulled out a small vial of herbs, a blend her mother had always kept with her. With shaking hands, Emily scattered the herbs in a circle around them, chanting an old incantation Clara had taught her. The Watcher halted, its glowing eyes fixed on Emily. The ground stopped trembling, and for a moment, the forest was silent again. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the Watcher dissipated into the night, leaving Emily and Daniel standing alone in the clearing. "Is it over?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I think so. My mother's herbs. They worked." As they made their way back to the edge of the forest, the weight of what had just happened settled over them. The legend of the Watcher in the woods was no longer just a story, it was a reality they had both faced and survived. But as they emerged from the trees, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still watching. The secrets of Ashwood Forest were not so easily laid to rest. Later that night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the events in her mind, trying to make sense of the impossible. She decided to return to the forest, to see if she missed anything that could give her more answers about her mother's death. When Daniel woke up the next morning and found Emily missing, panic surged through him. He raced back to the forest, calling for her. Hours passed with no sign of Emily. He found the clearing again, the symbols still faintly glowing. As he stepped into the circle, he felt a chill run down his spine. A whispering voice echoed through the trees, "You cannot escape." Daniel spun around, gun drawn, but saw nothing. The forest seemed to close in on him, the darkness growing thicker. He searched desperately, calling out for Emily, but there was no response. The Watcher had taken her. Emily Harper was never seen again, her fate sealed by the ancient spirit she had sought to understand. Daniel stood alone in the clearing, the weight of his failure crushing him. The Watcher in the woods had claimed another soul, and the town of Ashwood remained under its dark, silent watch.